Hi guys. So today I'm going to be presenting Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Blithedale Romance. My presentation is titled An Enchanting Mesmerism. So my argument, in the Blithedale Romance, Nathaniel Hawthorne presents Zenobia as the greatest mesmerist through her powerful femininity and enchantment of other characters. Although she dies, she ultimately sees through Hollingsworth and shows her power over her situation. So a little bit of background. I used the history and philosophy of animal magnetism, the practical guide, as the basis for my argument, because Hawthorne uses elements of animal magnetism and clairvoyance throughout the novel. One instance of clairvoyance we see is when Zenobia finally sees through um, Hollingsworth and everything that he's been doing. And in regards to animal magnetism, we see that through multiple characters throughout the novel as they continue to have a pull on one another and exert their control or power over each other. And then something cool that I found, I looked up what Zenobia meant, and the name means life of Zeus. So I thought that alluded to there being a Greek mythological allegory throughout the novel, in regards to Zenobia's powerful femininity. Um, and then in the preface, Hawthorne creates an atmosphere of strange enchantment beheld through which the inhabitants have a propriety of their own. We see this through the use of mesmeric enchantment by Zenobia as she continues to, throughout the novel, create this enchantress persona for multiple characters in the novel. I wanted to talk about Zenobia's feminine power. Um, and Zenobia is a mesmerizing character, which Coverdale points out at first glance when he describes her as a queen, showing that she embodies feminine power. Um, for instance, when he says, one felt an influence breathing out of her, such as we might suppose come from Eve. The association of Zenobia to Eve represents her as this powerful and influential woman, just as Eve from the Garden of Eden um, and or Paradise Lost, if you've read that one too, um, presents her as this female with choice and power and femininity. Um, and then in my second quote, as for Zenobia, there was a glow in her cheeks that made me think of Pandora. So similar to the way that um, Hawthorne alludes to Zenobia being powerful, like Eve, he also considers her like Pandora. Um, and it just shows that she has this mesmerizing effect on others, just as Zeus's jar has a temptation effect on Pandora. Similar to Pandora, Zenobia has an enchanting charm and allure um, for people. Um, and then Zenobia's sphere, I imagine, impressed itself powerfully on mine and transformed me during this period of my weakness into something like a mesmerical clairvoyant. So this quote alludes to the idea that Zenobia's mesmerizing effect on Miles allows him to see in a new light. And then I found support in animal magnetism when um, they state when the subject is in the magnetic state, the internal sense has the power of seeing through all space to the remotest bounds of the universe by an independent power of sight, and this constitutes true clairvoyance. So I see this through Coverdale's ability to see through his illness, using Zenobia's it almost shows that Zenobia has this mesmeric effect on him, so that even though he's sick, all he sees is her, and she has this mesmerical clairvoyance effect on him. And then the next quote, also from the same article, says the patient, though still alive and breathing, is dead to everything around him, save the magnetizer's voice. And I thought this also applied because Coverdale talks about how he's so ill, he could just die, he feels like dying, and Hollingsworth says he should find a way to live. They're kind of joking, or he's not really dying, but he feels so sick that he would rather just die. He doesn't have like the will to live. But Zenobia's voice acts as this mesmeric um, pull on him that supports him through his illness, and acts like that of a magnetizer to the magnetized, keeping him alive to some extent because he enjoys her voice. And then let's see. I also wanted to talk about Zenobia's enchanting effect on others. So like a mesmerist does, Zenobia entrances others, bending them to her will. And we see this when Priscilla first arrives. It says, she stood near the door, fixing a pair of large brown, melancholy eyes upon Zenobia, only upon Zenobia. She evidently saw nothing else in the room. So Zenobia stands out among the people there, showing her ability to capture attention to herself. And this alludes to a trance-like hypnosis she has on Priscilla by Zenobia. And then I found support in an article by Tater, and it says the master-slave relationship is introduced early in the novel during the first meeting between the dark temptress Zenobia and her blonde rival Priscilla. When the latter catches sight of Zenobia, she kneels before her in rapt silence. Coverdale suspects that the desire to become Zenobia's slave motivates Priscilla's presence at Blythedale. So this article kind of talks about the master-slave relationship between multiple characters, and I thought this related a lot to a mesmeric magnetizer to magnetizee relationship, in which Zenobia has this power over Priscilla. So when she comes, Priscilla is immediately drawn to Zenobia, and she kind of falls to her side, being her little like pet almost, following her around everywhere. And then the next quote, the touch had a magical effect. So this also shows this relationship between Priscilla and Zenobia, also alluding to that master-slave relationship, because when Zenobia just caresses her head and touches her, it immediately changes her attitude and she gets really attached to her. So it shows the connection to Zenobia as a mesmeric, impactful force upon Priscilla. And then she talked more largely and freely with him than with Zenobia, towards whom indeed her feelings seemed not so much to be confidence as involuntary affection. So this idea that Zenobia invokes involuntary affection from characters like Priscilla suggests that she has a magnetic pull on others, similar to that of animal magnetism. And then have you bewitched her? The idea that Zenobia has created a bewitchment upon Priscilla suggests she has a mesmeric enchantment over her. This is when she is outside, and she's like looking around. She thinks she heard her name, and Coverdale alludes to the idea that Zenobia has bewitched her in some way. And then Zenobia is an enchantress. To enchant someone can mean to put someone under a spell or bewitch them, similar to Have You Bewitched Her, which Coverdale alludes to her doing to him, reinforcing her ability to mesmerize the other characters. And then finally, tell him he has murdered me, tell him that I'll haunt him. This is at the end of the novel, or towards the end of the novel. And it shows her power to try and control situations through manipulation of others and a kind of afterlife enchantment she's suggesting she'll possess over Hollingsworth. Um, yeah. And then for my counter arguments and support of those counter arguments, all throughout the novel, obviously, multiple characters show instances of having this the mesmerist traits, such as clairvoyance and animal magnetism. But more specifically, Priscilla could be considered as a mesmerist through her mysteriousness, casting her love spell upon Coverdale. We don't find out until the very end of the novel, but he reveals the secret that he was himself in love with Priscilla, and it kind of shows that maybe throughout the novel, she was the one who had a magnetic pull on Coverdale and not the other way around, and not Hollingsworth. And then similarly, I saw nature as a mesmerist when Priscilla is looking around, thinking she heard her name. It says, but all at once, midway in Hollingsworth, she paused, looked round about her towards the river, the road, the woods, and back towards us, appearing as if she heard someone calling her name. I thought this kind of showed the pull that nature has on people. She thinks she's hearing things, but it could be a bigger message that nature is pulling us in one direction or another. And then from the article I used by Dill, she says, many of the critical discussions about Zenobia that leave out a discussion of her conventionalities, sentimental qualities, portray her as either a selfish contestant for the affections of a man or a mad woman driven to suicide. Even in the critical readings of Zenobia as a feminist, scholars often include that she is a figure of defeat. Her sentimentalism thus never emerges as a source of power or virtue. So this counter argues my argument because I am arguing that Zenobia has this femininity and power that mesmerism gives her, whereas this talks about how she is a figure of defeat, so the opposite of power and feminism. And then Mr. Coverdale as the mesmerist, it says, I was taking note of Zenobia's aspect, and it impressed itself on me so distinctly that I can now summon her up like a ghost. So this idea that he can summon something is similar to that of of animal magnetism, in which the magnetizer uses equilibrium or uses animal magnetism to set equilibrium, like summoning. And then finally, and I think the biggest counter argument here is that Hollingsworth is the mesmerist, greatest mesmerist. And the quote I used was, Hollingsworth was likely to make two proselytes, Zenobia and Priscilla. He ends up doing that, and obviously he tries to place his ideologies over both of them and uses them to follow his ideas. So I think that's probably the biggest counter argument. And then my discussion questions. Do you think Zenobia or Hollingsworth had more power over the other in their relationship with one another? In other words, who was the greater mesmerist? Does Zenobia's suicide show more or less power and femininity? And in what ways did Zenobia lack a mesmeric effect over others? Thank you so much.